So maybe I was asking this, Robert, because you've been in both. So you've been in Tesco, for example, one of the, as you mentioned, one of the top retailers in the world and in the UK, and also now your life brought you to Philip Morris International, but in the brand retail section, let's call it. And you, let's say, I don't want to put mouths in your word, but Philip Morris or International, the brand retail division, positions themselves as a premium retailer, I understand, and that's why I wanted to also understand from you, what do you see in one side, on the other side. But let's go now to what we are right now. So we are going to talk a bit more about Philip Morris International and your story within the organization. And for me, it's interesting to get your view on how is actually Kaizen and Lean, the methodologies within the organization in the brand retail division, being mixed in all this world between the consumer experience, the back office processes. What are you trying to do also from your side to bring Kaizen and Lean into the organization?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say, again, Philip Morris from an organization perspective, let's call it from a margin perspective, more at the premium into the luxury space, margins are strong. So the focus on cost optimization isn't really as strong. But what attracted me to go to Philip Morris in the first place, I think, was having that background experience as I did. The company that I've had I think it's got the biggest opportunity, let's say, for optimization, particularly from a Lean and from a Kaizen perspective, is Philip Morris. Because it's a business in transformation. It's a business that traditionally has been a B2B retailer, B2B organization, moving into B2C only 10 years ago. With its new product range, the smoke-free products, it's made that decision as an organization to transition into B2C because the products need a lot more explanation. Our smoke-free products, in some cases, a little bit more complicated than traditional cigarette. So it felt that it was right to be able to offer that direct connection with the consumer to help explain the product and how they work, what the benefits are, how they help a consumer on their journey towards smoke-free, and that's ultimately our idea as a business. We want people not to smoke anymore. It's not good for you, so we would rather they stop smoking. If they can't stop smoking, however, we've got a range of products that we can help the consumer with reducing their exposure to harmful chemicals. But it wasn't a simple journey, and it was something where they felt that we needed to go to B2C. But having done that transition, and when I came across the business first in my consulting background in 2016, a very decentralized company, so markets having a lot of the power from that perspective. Not many centralized processes, so and this rapidly then expanding B2C channels business, where a lot of the ownership from that perspective is coming from the markets themselves, not a central entity which I had always been used to in my past. So retailers in general tend to be very centralized, and because you've got thousands of colleagues in different locations executing the same processes, you want them to execute them exactly the same so that you get the best optimization. So I joined Philip Morris because I thought, for me, it was just this incredible opportunity to take a very suboptimal B2C business. Not by design that it was suboptimal, just the fact that the nature and the culture of the business had it grown up as a decentralized organization. Therefore, in every market you went into, you had a different variation of what retail meant to that particular division of the business. And when I joined the central team in 2016, I did sort of 2 or 3 years there working for the central team, helping them set up global processes. So how could you run and execute processes in any store, in any location in the world from a Philip Morris perspective, in exactly the same way of putting the guidelines and the governance and the structure and the processes to help that. Also then supporting them with globalized systems. So again, in a similar way, because the business is decentralized, each market had created its own retail technology to support its retail business. So for me, it seemed to me to be a fantastic and exciting journey of probably the least optimal global retailer that I'd ever come across, where I felt that my skills and experience and background could offer value, I think, to the organisation, and ultimately offer myself a great personal challenge. From a professional perspective, I think, I don't see myself moving away from Philip Morris anytime in the near future. Very much enjoying my journey there, and because there's still very much to do. And I think certainly with the lean and the Kaizen, thinking and methodology, which is now kind of, for me, it comes very easily to me. Is that there's so much room for optimization, whereas some other organisations where they've had individuals like myself, like yourself, come in and spend time with them, and they're optimal, the opportunities that become harder to get at and more difficult to find and to really let's say transformational improvement and optimization. So yeah, for me it was about the challenge, the opportunity of trying to take a fully B2B culture and organization and dragging it into the B2C world in the most optimal way possible, whilst dealing with a decentralized business, and that for me, super challenging, super exciting, and also that another level of complexity they have within their retail business is that most of the colleagues that work in stores don't work for Philip Morris. They work for a third-party agency. I think we're kind of like 95% of the colleagues don't actually work for Philip Morris. So there's another level of cultural separation for for those colleagues.
Another barrier
in the store.
that is there.
Another barrier, exactly. And I think particularly when you're looking at as we have sort of 7,000 plus stores globally, where you've got 95% of your colleagues that don't actually work for your organisation, how you go through those cultural changes that are needed that we were speaking about earlier becomes even harder, because then you're having to deal with a local market team who are then dealing with a third party who then actually then deal with the colleagues, and being able to transverse those layers in the most effective way possible to be able to deliver the meaningful change that's needed. Again, to come back to those same three things for me. Is it better for the colleague? Better for the consumer, simpler for the colleague, cheaper for the business. I was
going to go back there with the next question, but I think you just put it there. But in any case, maybe I will ask you, Robert, that when you have this kind of challenge, because that's a huge challenge, you have a decentralized organization, different cultures, different colleagues also with third parties, different ways to run the store, because as you mentioned, the B2C business grow a little bit on their own in different markets and so on. How Kaizen or the lean methodology can help on that? What is your take on what is the main, besides these 3 points that I was going to mention, but how do you see for organization like this? Maybe, of course, not every organization has these challenges, but most of them might happen, like multinational companies. What is the power of lean and Kaizen in this type of challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's, for me then, certainly with the Philip Morris business, it's been playing on very much on the colleague side of things. So I think Philip Morris recognises that one-to-one interaction, in the sort of, the premium and into luxury space, where as a consumer you come in, not with all the knowledge, clearly with some desire, but can be different levels. Could be a problem, could be that you're trying to buy something, but you're coming into a store as anyone does into any store, as you're looking for a one-to-one interaction with a colleague, or you're looking for people. Otherwise you just shop online now. It's so easy to shop online. Right. You're looking for the comfort, let's say, and the cultural support of a store. And I think that's what's helped us, I think, within Philip Morris, is to make sure that we're focusing on the colleague. And if we can deliver a great experience for that colleague, then they can deliver a great experience to the consumer. And I think then the other piece for Philip Morris that is very important is also the cost aspect. So actually trying to tie those things together to say, well, actually, if I can make a process better for a colleague, which will mean that their experience is better, they can then deliver a better consumer experience. And we're very focused on delivering great consumer experience because of the nature of trying to sell something that's fundamentally different and new into the market. That experience for the consumer becomes really important. And then ultimately doing that at a cheaper cost is almost something that the business has struggled with, I think, a little bit. Although we do have many manufacturing plants around the world where obviously we will have the lean and Kaizen methodologies fully employed. It's not really been transitioned over to the retail side of the business. But actually, I think one of the projects that we've worked on in the last couple of years is is blending then technology, so a great technology solution, with better process in the stores, and actually then being able to show that, to our leadership, to be able to say, well, we've managed to be able to do that at 20% cheaper labour cost, and do it in one of our key markets, to be able to tell a great case study and a great story to others, I think has been the key, to be able to develop and evolve. Because ultimately, because each of our local markets, they have their own viewpoint, their own perspective, and our focus was to target some of our larger markets to do this implementation with them hand in hand. So to do it very much as a partnership between the local market Philip Morris team, as well as their agency actually staffing the stores, ourselves and yourselves, to be able to go on a journey together to look at where the optimization opportunities were, implementing the right technology to support those processes, implementing the right change management to get the piece going over, and then being able to come back at the end of it and say, actually, in our market in Germany, as you know, we've worked on the project very well, to be able to come back and say, we've taken 20% out of our cost base of labour. Obviously, within a retail organisation, your labour and your rent in your stores, those are your two biggest cost drivers. Obviously, rent's relatively fixed; you can renegotiate your lease on every few years, but ultimately, it's very hard to reduce that. But obviously, labour is your biggest variable cost. So to be able
and all this, interesting, not jeopardizing the consumer experience or other processes that we have in the stores. So by even increasing those efficiency in the processes or quality on the consumer experience. Right?
I think that's it. It was to be able to come back to be able to tell that story, to say not only we reduced costs by 20% on the labour, we've actually then improved service, and we're delivering better experience to consumer. We're selling more product, and we're getting much better KPIs on the commercial aspect of running the store, better KPIs on the colleague aspects as well, better employee engagement and ENPS, and we're doing that at 20% cheaper cost. I think from that perspective, managed to say raise a few eyebrows, I think, within the organisation, and actually start to get into the place where we can snowball the projects and
build on something
and build on it. I think that's
maybe Rob, if you want, because there is one point on that about the case study that on this type of projects that have been happening in Philip Morris. Maybe you can give us already some type of idea on how this project looked like and what is the story behind it. Also for retailers, I'm looking mainly at people that can be watching us and say, okay, I have maybe similar challenges, maybe not at the scale of PMI and having a lot of markets. Maybe I have my market, whether if it's in Poland, in Germany, or somewhere else. Like, give us just some overview on how this happened and what were the stages of the project, what were we looking at or focusing on, maybe not just on the efficiency process, but also on the for example, the technology side of it and so on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, for me, the first thing I did when I landed in Philip Morris was to ask our data team to share what was our labour cost globally, and which markets were we spending the most amount of money on from a labour perspective. Having known the business as a consultant, then when joining it on a full-time basis, I knew that the processes in stores were suboptimal. So I thought I'd go and see what were we spending on labour, look at where globally there might be the biggest opportunities to go and look at. Certainly dealing with some of the internal politics where some markets are less responsive to change than others, again, having known that from the past. So took those numbers straight away, and then had some initial discussions with some of the key markets to say, what do they think their strengths and weaknesses were from a labour perspective? Did they think that they were optimal? What were they putting in place to try and optimise labour? Came away from those discussions very quickly to realise this was a big opportunity for the organisation. And I think at that point then we did some store visits to go and inspect some of the key markets where we were spending a lot of money on labour, just to see it firsthand, to see what we could expect in stores, and saw a lot of inefficiency from that perspective. Very untidy back of houses, which for me is always a nice, easy acid test. You can go into a retailer or a logistics warehouse from that perspective, and within 20 seconds you can tell. You can tell whether it's optimal or not. If you can eat your dinner off the floor, this place is employing the lean and the Kaizen methodologies, and therefore likely to be in an optimal state.
Maybe I don't know to how much this applies to retail. Probably the same.
Yeah.
But our founder was normally saying that 5S, so the organization of spaces, just by looking into 5S while entering any kind of space, manufacturing, retail, logistics, whatever, that will tell you how much mature are you on lean, Kaizen, or efficiency in the processes. Just by looking at that, you already got an idea or where this organization is in that terms. And I think it's completely true.
It's absolutely true. Coming from my consulting background, it was one of those things you could literally tell going into a retailer or into a store or a warehouse that on the same thing. You can tell within 5 to 10 seconds whether this place has what's its scale of optimization opportunity. Mm-hmm. Basically, that was always the thing to me. Could I eat my dinner off the floor? If I could eat my dinner off the floor, then actually it's going to be quite hard to go and find the optimization opportunities. If it was messy, it was going to be relatively easy to go and optimize. So I think from that perspective, the project was then very much around knowing that there was some big opportunities straight away. I think from my own perspective, having the skills and the background within lean, my practice of them had been, let's say, a little bit looser over the years, and that's why I felt it would be helpful to bring in a company like yourselves, like Kaizen, to help us then with the actual implementation and the assessment of what the opportunities were within our retail business. And we picked 2 or 3 markets to go and look at from that perspective, to look at their labour base. How are they managing their labour? What processes were they using in order to schedule staff to say how many people do I need for particular times of the day? And we found this thing that I from a Philip Morris perspective, I would describe as flatlining labour. So for the peak hours for when you needed 10, 15 people, whatever it might be for a store, they were basically putting those peak hours in all day, every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and therefore that's where the optimization was needed.
We were discussing now with Rob about the case study, and we're discussing about these 3, I think, to summarize in 3 pillars, right? So we mentioned about staff allocation, the workforce management on how to improve the efficiency of our resources, placing them on the right moment of the day and even hour. Then we had also the technology, so how we can bring technology that supports the processes for our staffs and takes away the thinking from our workforce. And the last one, we're talking about process optimization in different areas. So you were mentioning about delivery of the customer experiences, but also process optimization on the back office and so on. So let's build up. I don't know if coming back to this, because as far as I remember, Robert, we had in the process based, we had team management. So how is the communication with the team? Also building capabilities within the team, training the team on the specific parts of the CX. Also improving the CX delivery and improving the stock management as well as some back office processes, mainly related with inventorization, for example, replenishment processes and so on. But in the end, it falls also into the stock. But if we take all these 3 pillars, what we are discussing at the end of the day is that we want to have a process that goes from the contact with the consumer, so the physical interaction, to the supply chains and logistics, so the moment where I get the stock through the door from the different suppliers, how I can be the most efficient possible in my operations. So to maybe continue on that thread and to finalize it, what were the kind of the lessons learned from this project? What did you see the potential in terms of future opportunities, and also the challenges that came across during the implementation, for example?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, for us as an organization, still very immature, I would say, from a retail perspective. We talk a little bit about Germany, where we got some big benefits pretty quickly, both in terms of commercial as well as cost optimization. But then if we look at Portugal, for example, where what we had in Portugal that was quite different to Germany is we had a very skilled and mature retail leadership team. So a team that had come from other retailers, and they had, I think, worked really hard without technology, in some cases, to implement great and better workforce management processes and better process optimization, having been schooled, let's say, in more mature retail organizations. So actually the benefits that we saw in Portugal from a cost optimization perspective, much lower, because they were doing a great job and they understood that the dynamic of, let's say, workforce management. But for there, it was then more about the commercial and the colleague opportunities as part of process improvement. So delivering simpler processes to colleagues, meaning they could spend and focus more time on the consumer, and ultimately then that being a catalyst for driving sales. So I think from that perspective, again, Philip Morris is a great organisation because it's almost dealing with like multiple companies under one roof, because there's this sort of localization aspect to our organisation. But I think for me that bringing in the Kaizen and the lean thinking, driving that standardization, for me then I think is key, and that's ultimately our biggest challenge as an organisation. I think moving forward is how can we bring that standardization globally in as many processes as possible as we can do, so that we can offer a very similar experience to consumers, a very similar experience to colleagues, and ultimately a very similar P&L off the back of it. So yeah, I think for me that's where our exciting opportunity lives, is basically trying to get everyone to the same benchmark.
That's actually the big challenge, right?
Yes.
Because coming from, you mentioned it, is decentralization through the retail division, and now trying to centralize all this. Of course, these first markets were kind of a case study, as you mentioned, to try to understand, look, this is what this kind of thinking can bring. These are the benefits that come out of it, and not only in P&L benefits, but also colleague related benefits. And now, how can we balance the different cultures, the different business models in the different markets, together with the centralization that we are mentioning, right? There is one topic that I think is interesting to discuss with you, because at the end of the day, you are head of digital capabilities transformation, very related to technology. You yourself mentioned that you started even with your studies back at the day, very linked to technology. And this project that you were mentioning had a bit of technology in it, but I would like to kind of step a little bit back, look at the bigger picture. In terms of our retailer, and also looking into efficiency, Kaizen methodologies and lean, because sometimes there is this kind of, I feel like, big fight, right? Technology versus Kaizen, because Kaizen is more about things, automatizing things, but more into the process without the need of a system itself, and trying to find the quick wins, with the quick improvements that can be done without systems involved, plus the big investments on systems that bring automatically new routines or new ways of doing, but of course simplify a lot the processes, but of course take a lot of time. That's also right. So how do you see this fit, Robert? Also looking at your experience with these projects, also in different retailers, how important is technology for a retailer, and also how important is to fit it within a kind of a lean Kaizen methodology, and how it should be done, because also the way of implementing can be different. No, if first do the efficiencies, if first introduce the system. What is your view on that?
So I think, obviously, let's say, I guess within any, let's say, organization, I think these days technology is key. It's super important. But I think for me, it fits very well with Kaizen and lean from the perspective that actually it needs to be business process led. Because although technology can help to reduce the amount of people you need in your organization to do tasks, there'll always be people left in an organization. And it's making sure that whether they work in head office, whether they work in a store, whether they work in a manufacturing unit, making the processes as simple and as optimal as possible, using technology to help support part of that, but ultimately making sure that the process is king, for me is super key. Because what I've seen in my career history is basically where technology has been misused, and it's actually not optimized a process or created a more complex process, a more long-winded process, which results in waste. So I think from that perspective, it is key, but I think technology always needs to make sure that it's supporting the business process in the right way. So that process piece should override everything else, and that we always think about technology as helping to simplify that process. And in some cases, it becomes the backbone of that process. Particularly with let's say an e-commerce order, for example, it's the backbone of the process. But ultimately, there's still individuals, there's still humans involved in it. Whether that's optimizing the website and its appearance, or the pricing, or whatever it is, there is someone interacting with that technology. Or whether it's on the back end of that, where we're picking and packing and dispatching an order, there's an individual who's done that. And again, even in the warehousing space, I know we're kind of more moving into the robotic space, but there's still going to be a limit to that, and there'll still be a human element to it. So I think as technology takes over and becomes bigger and larger part of these, it's making sure that we don't get too far away from the actual core process that we're looking to support. And I think then probably building on from that now, and certainly something, a massive hot topic I know kind of globally, and certainly is within our organisation at the moment, around AI. What I've seen within our organisation, as I would call it, a sporadic use of AI. It's being used in random business processes, and it kind of seems to be popping up in a lot of different places. I'm sort of part and work with my team on our community of practice that we have around AI. And at the moment, I would say it seems to be very random in its application. And I think, again, this is for me where I see Kaizen and Lean really being able to help control that, I think, for the future, which is where should you apply AI within your organisation? And from that perspective, using Kaizen and Lean to actually work out what the biggest opportunities within the organisation are from a value stream perspective, I think still it should be the priority for an organisation. And how I see AI as a good example here, in technology in general, is it's just part of a toolkit. It's part of a toolkit for a Kaizen or Lean practitioner, and it's about, from that perspective, choosing the right tool for the right job at the right time. So when you're looking at process optimization and looking at that, saying actually when is the right time to delve into the toolkit with the technology team and say actually, right, this part of the process I think is better served from a technology perspective. So let's work together to figure out what's the right solution for that. Do we have something within our existing architecture? Do we need to go out and find something else from an external partner? How do I best achieve that process with technology? And that's where I think hope for us as an organisation moving forward is trying to use AI in a more targeted manner to say actually where are our biggest value streams across the business, where's the biggest opportunity for improvement, and then applying AI to those use cases rather than a process that might save our organisation $5,000. Why wouldn't we look at an AI solution in one of our largest value streams where it could save tens of millions of dollars? That's absolutely where we should be spending our time and effort. And I'm sure we'll come to some of the smaller opportunities that in the longer term, but ultimately trying to apply technology to those big business problems is where we'll get the most value for an organisation, and probably take the learnings from there that will allow us then to serve some of those smaller use cases, the quicker wins over time, but not being overly worried about it, because as long as we're approaching the biggest opportunities within the organisation, applying technology to it, we're going to get the most value out of it from that perspective.
I really like what you're mentioning, because at the end of the day, it's more or less also how I think regarding the systems and AI. You brought this topic, is very hot right now, but in the end, I think we shouldn't forget that AI systems, at the end of the day, they are tools.
Yes.
Like also, it can be any type of things related to a business, right? That we use, if it's a system on workforce management, or if it's a system to place an order or to control your stock. They are tools that we use for a specific purpose. But I imagine this as going to the mechanic, for example, for a car, right? The mechanic has also tools, right? Has a set of tools. At the end of the day, they are tools. If he gets the process wrong on checking first this and then that, or if taking out the wheel first before checking something that actually needs to have the wheel on in terms of pressures or whatever, you can have the perfect tool to take the wheel out in a matter of seconds. At the end of the day, you will need to put back the wheel, because you took it out with the right tool, it's fast, but at the end of the day, you notice that, but I need the wheel again back, so I need to put it back. So with Kaizen and systems itself, or AI, I have the same feeling that first you need to get your process right. And that's exactly what you were saying. And then using those tools at the best place so that you can take advantage of those tools to make your process more efficient without any kind of issues that are brought, for example, by humans or by the different employees, or minimizing the risk of those issues happening at the end of the day. But if you get those processes right, then fitting the tool is much easier. One of our colleagues, or your colleague from PMI, say hi from here, Przemek, from the Polish unit, he was always telling me, Aleix, remember, the system should work for us and not us working for the system. And that's exactly it. Because if the system is actually not working for the employee will need to do double kind of muda, what we call the waste time, to actually get to the right output that he wants to have from the very beginning, right? So that's quite interesting, because right now in the world we see, right, that AI is, okay, in the last couple of years it made an explosion, but also how you see this fitting into the future of organizations, because now AI is quite there for specific things. Maybe organizations still are not much into it, but looking in the future in technology is also how this fits within the future of technology in the organizations and in processes and so on. And for what I understand, Rob, you mentioned exactly this, right? That first look into the process and then choose the best tool and try to go into the big topics first, and then get there to the minor or the other quick wins that you have, that you can learn from those, and then go there, right? But if I would have to ask you, as a retailer, what is the kind of specific technologies that you see related to Kaizen or Lean? What are those technologies that you see are very specific or very needed within the sector, that you are not seeing across different retailers? Not having in place, for example, a workforce management tool, or not having in place a specific technology for stock management. What is kind of your experience with this?
So I mean, along a similar thread, I think it's focusing on process. So when I think about a retail store or retail business from that perspective, it's looking at the basics first. So the first thing you need to be able to do is you need to be able to sell something to a consumer. So if you've got the right point of sale solution, or solutions, let's say, from that perspective, to be able to sell product to your consumer. So that's pretty key. Then you've got stock to manage, because you're trying to sell the consumer something, and you need to make sure that stock and it's stored on a system, and that availability of that data is where it needs to be across the business at the right point in time. And then for me, then it's always like the third one that comes behind that then is the workforce management solution, because ultimately, if I've got the right stock in the right location, I can sell product to my consumer, and I've got the right amount of hours in my store to serve the consumers in the way that I wish to serve them and they wish to be served. I'm onto a kind of let's say a good starting point from that perspective. So that's on the stores aspect. When you come in then to let's say the rest of the organization, particularly from an e-commerce perspective, then it's an order management system and a website, which are pretty key to those. But for me, again, thinking around, and I think this is probably where, for me, I see AI coming in the future, is into that order management system, where it's going to it's already very complex from a stock movement perspective, particularly for larger scale retailers that have stores themselves as stock locations, as well as multiple warehouses. Some cases they have a marketplace offer, they have dropship operations, so third parties delivering product to customer. So I see AI really coming into that space, into the order management, order fulfillment perspective, where as a consumer, I'm coming to a retailer where I'm looking for a particular product or products within a particular time frame. I want it in a particular location. And I think then the ability for AI to look at all of the possible options, including my own infrastructure as well as third-party infrastructure, which might include lockers, other retailers that might do click and collect locations, of being able to work out where is my stock, where is my consumer, what time frame do they need it in, how do I then most optimally bring that order together and get it to the consumer within the time frame they want. I think that's probably where I can see AI really having some massive value, I think, in the longer term. But ultimately, it all comes back to that, the same thing is around what's the process that I want to offer, what's the proposition that I want to offer to my customers, and then using the technology to help me optimize that. And I think that would be the case for, certainly from if we assume that labor can also be further optimized in that space from a piece, but looking at stock, really I can see that AI is going to really, I think, take that to the next level, which is all about stripping out more and more cost from the business to be able to serve the consumer as quickly as possible or within the time frame that they're looking for in the most cost optimal way. I think that will be where AI can take it to another level, where particularly, let's say, for the grocery and the lower margin side of retail, where every penny counts, or even half a penny, or even a tenth of a penny is super important. I can see AI really kind of developing and improving that.
So maybe last question regarding that, Robert, because we talk about AI, it's a very interesting topic in my opinion. From your words, do you see it kind of as a threat, AI, like in a mean that it can develop onto that as an opportunity to kind of automatize processes or look at different ends of the process and bring that together, and that's actually creating a seamless experience. But the threat in means of how it can grow a little bit without control, or be in a decentralized organization, even sometimes some people doing A, other people doing B, other people doing C. Do you see it as this, or do you see it something that it will bring much more value than something that can create a much more inefficiencies?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I guess with any technology, if it's implemented and designed correctly, it will give you the outcomes that you're looking for. I mean, I always would sort of say from a technology perspective, anything's possible. It's just a question of time and money.
Yeah, right.
So from that perspective, AI is obviously going to increase the capability, and therefore the opportunity probably grows. But ultimately, it'll come back to the right application. And again, I was talking about it's a tool. It's a tool. And if you use the right tool at the right time for the right job, you'll get the best out of it. If you use the wrong tool at the wrong time for the wrong reasons, it's not going to give you the outcomes that you're looking for. So again, coming back to the AI just expands, let's say, the thinking capability. So coming back to that thing around from a technology perspective, it's taking out the need for an individual to think, because it gives them the right answer, or it gives them the most optimal answer for them to then follow on for the process. But it's all about the application of who's designed it, who's implemented it, how they implemented it, how does it fit into the process. So it gives a greater opportunity for greater thinking from a systems perspective, which I think is fantastic. But it comes with the need to make sure, probably even more so, that the implementation is done in the right way. Is that the right tool for that particular process at this time? If the answer is no, then don't use it. If the answer is yes, then do it, but do it in a controlled and governed way. Because I think ultimately the piece with AI is that governance piece of making sure that the results that come out, I know in some cases it could be the wrong answer, but I think basically the level of thinking that AI could give us in terms of an outcome could further reduce the need for particular tasks, particular processes, which is fantastic news. But again, it all comes back to it needs to be implemented by humans. Whether AI won't design, design it. But I think potentially from a Kaizen and Lean perspective, it could also be employed in terms of using it to help optimize processes. So, what is the best approach to optimize this process? And using the AI to help, I think, in that case, is in terms of solutionizing and optimizing, in terms of looking at the possible outcomes and what's the right selection. I think that could be another area that it could be used, let's say on the optimization and the operations development teams within a retailer. So, and again, then probably as well, the other piece is helping to crunch big data, which obviously is part of a Lean and a Kaizen project is always quite key, is making sure you analyze the data of the outcomes of the process. So that ability to be able to read and interpret and analyze that data using AI, again, that could help reduce the process of executing a Kaizen or a Lean implementation, because it just means as a practitioner, as you and I would be, we need to do less of the thinking. The system can do some of the thinking and analysis of the data itself. So yeah, I think there's lots of ways but all for me always comes back to what's the business process, and is this the right application for it, and doing it in the right way, and using the right expertise that you have around the business to make sure that you're thinking about all the angles, thinking both tactically and strategically, thinking about the bigger picture, and not just putting in a technology for technology's sake, or because that's what my vendor is telling me that I should be implementing. It's always coming back to the business process.
I think that's key at the end of the day, because you need to understand first where you are and what is your vision, and then decide. Even in Kaizen Institute itself, we have some in the recent years, we develop a technology section, let's call it division, which actually takes the methodology, our methodology in terms of Kaizen related to technology. And the first thing that we would always do would be like, okay, let's start with an assessment, right? But not a process assessment in that case. Also, of course, it can be done, but a technology assessment. So you look at the process that are related to technology, exactly like that, knowing the bigger vision, knowing the strategy, knowing where are we going, knowing what are the things that we're going to develop in the future. Now, okay, let's take a look at data. Let's take a look at systems, at the processes related to those systems. And now let's define together what are the systems that we have, what are the inefficiencies that are there. It first needs process observation and implementation of improvements, or we can already jump to specific system solution. After that, if it's the case, then okay, what is the best tool? If it's AI, if it's a system of workforce management, if it's a system related to stock management, whatever it is, what is the system exactly in stock management? How do we want the system to look like? What should we be doing? And so on and so on. So it's like the first step that always you take to start some transformation in terms of technology. Robert, I will be hitting the end of the conversation. So the last part that I have is the Kaizen anecdote, I call it. And I always ask my guests to present some kind of anecdote that they may have related to Kaizen, lean implementation, something in the world of process improvement, continuous improvement, lean methodologies, Kaizen methodologies, something that can be personal, private, but that brings some kind of thoughts on the Kaizen methodology from your side. Do you have any for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think so. There's two. There's one a bit more serious and one a bit more tongue in cheek. So, I mean, the first one for me is having been a retailer now for a number of years, is I would struggle to understand why someone wouldn't use Kaizen and lean to try and optimize their business. Because when I've seen organizations that haven't used it, again, talking about the similar scenario with us with AI, it becomes a very random and sporadic, and it doesn't really deliver the value that it should do. By using the Kaizen and lean methodologies, it allows you to target the most important, expensive, potentially customer sensitive processes within the organization and optimize them from a customer, from a colleague, and from a cost perspective. So for me, having been through that and seen other businesses struggle when they haven't been using those type of methodologies, it comes back to, well, if you're a mature retailer or even an immature retailer, why wouldn't you use them? And I think that's where you see organizations struggle, where they aren't applying these type of methodologies to their organization. And I'd argue with the first business where I got into it originally, Dixon Store Group, they wouldn't exist today. They would have disappeared by the wayside. They were the only electronics retailer in the UK that still stands today, because they invested in this, because they could see what their CEO had seen it happen at Tesco and implemented it within the organisation. So they knew that they were optimising the right processes that offered the most value to the business, cost the most, and therefore they could return as much cash as possible to the organisation to fuel the growth for the future. So I think from that perspective, I think any organisation that is struggling and having a hard time, absolutely this will be where I go. But on the flip side of that, if I was a great retailer that was having a great time at the moment, I'd be doubling down on this as well to make sure that I could keep growing sales, keep improving margin. So it becomes a bit of a no-brainer, I think, from that perspective. So that's probably, let's say, on that side. And then let's say a bit of tongue in cheek, as maybe just a little anecdote, was after I'd first did my Lean Six Sigma training and I'd got my green belt, I was running a project where we were trying to reduce the amount of damages that we had back at Dixon's when we had customers that had damaged laptops, and they'd send them back into the business for repair. And we had, I don't know, something like a 40% damage rate of products coming back in. So we'd go and collect it from the customer, try and bring it back into our warehouse where our repair teams were, repair it, and then send it back to the consumer. And 40% of those laptops, we were just having to refund the customer the full cost of the value for the laptop because we damage it in transit. So I'd set up process optimization where we were looking to improve that, and we ended up buying 500 red plastic boxes so that we could put foam inside them and put these laptops in them. So we gave them to all the delivery drivers, so when they collected it, they put it in the foam box, put a little security tag on them, they came back in, and then they got delivered back out again to reduce the damages. And I think we ended up reducing the damages by 98%. It was a massive change. but we'd ordered all this stock of the 500 plastic boxes and all the foam inserts to go with them. I remember it was the day before we were going to launch the service, and I couldn't find anyone to help me glue these bits of foam into these boxes. So I was in this warehouse on the mezzanine in one of the warehouses in Dixon's, up on the top floor. It was probably about 5,000 square feet. And I basically arranged all the boxes out, had these pallets of foam, and I spent the full day there with gluing every single piece of that foam into those boxes. But I got them all done, got them all palletized up, and they were ready then to go out to our delivery centres. You
created your own lean
factory,
workstation.
Exactly that. Just me on my own with 500 boxes. But it got done, but it was hard work that day.
That's great. Thanks for sharing with us, Rob. Now we are heading to the end. So as you know, the last part is I hand over the farewell to my guest to just say last few words. But from my side, maybe I will just to the audience say a few words. Of course, we will be back soon with the new episodes for the KAIZEN podcast. Probably next one already coming back to the Polish language. But I would like to thank you, Rob, for being with us here. Too. It's been also great to be able to combine this trip so that you are here with us, and I appreciate you having the time to come over and chat with me. So Rob, all yours. The camera, as you know, is there for you. So last few words, and we say farewell to the podcast.
Thank you, Alish. Yeah, so just the final few words from my side. I think as we've touched on a little bit earlier, I think in general as a retail organisation, whether you're super mature, whether you're immature and starting out, whether you're big, you're small, or anything in between, the lean and the Kaizen ways of working for me have been fantastic. For me over the career, I've seen huge benefits for retailers, both for the consumers, for colleagues, for cost, and from that perspective, I would urge you to use a company if you're not familiar with those processes and you need some help and support. Use an agency like Alish is within the KAIZEN Institute, or anyone else that might be there locally to help support you with this, because it's not easy when you start, for sure, but using and harnessing the power of these tools and this methodology, for me, I've seen transform many business, and even those that are the most successful can even use it and apply it on a day-to-day basis to further enhance. So for me, it's almost a no-brainer within retailer from a retail perspective. So encourage you to seek help if you don't feel you can do it yourselves, and to be able to work with a partnership to help improve and develop your organisation.